The red carpet was no longer just a strip of fabric laid over concrete. It had become a battlefield of light and noise. Camera flashes detonated in rapid succession, turning the night into a fractured strobe of white-hot moments. Each burst froze Serafina Laurent in 1,000 imperfect poses, her smile dissected and consumed by hungry lenses. Fans screamed her name with raw devotion, their voices colliding into a chaotic wave that pressed against her chest and made it difficult to breathe. The air smelled of perfume, sweat, and electrical heat from the equipment, vibrating with a manic energy that allowed no silence and no refuge. The paparazzi leaned forward like predators at the edge of a watering hole, shouting questions that overlapped and blurred into an incomprehensible roar. They called out her name again and again, demanding her attention and a piece of her. Their words about designers, relationships, and scandals were less inquiries and more hooks, each one trying to snag her and pull her closer. Microphones hovered inches from her face, capturing every uneven breath and involuntary tremor, amplifying her vulnerability to millions who would never know how close she was to breaking. Serafina's breath came fast and shallow, each inhale scraping her throat as if the air itself had become sharp. A microphone near her collarbone picked up the faint hitch in her breathing, betraying the calm facade she fought to maintain. Panic tightened around her lungs like a vice. Even as her lips curved into a practiced smile, her body told a different story of fear, barely restrained, an instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. Serafina forced herself to smile and hide the shaking in her hands. Her thoughts spiraled around the letter she had received that day and the certainty that her stalker would be there. She searched the crowd for danger and for security, panic rising as she noticed her guards distracted and looking at their phones. Her thoughts collapsed into a relentless loop as the memory of the letter burned vividly in her mind, with jagged handwriting and obsessive promises of ownership. Every face in the crowd became suspect, and every shadow felt deliberate. She scanned the perimeter without moving her head, terrified that a single wrong glance might invite disaster. The men assigned to protect her stood only feet away, yet they might as well have been miles distant, their attention fractured at the worst possible moment. Then, the energy shifted. What had been chaotic but controlled snapped into something feral. A sudden surge rippled through the crowd as a metal barrier buckled and toppled forward with a shriek of tortured steel. The screams changed pitch from adoration to alarm. Time seemed to slow as people stumbled with arms flailing and faces twisting into masks of fear. From the collapse rose a single, unhinged voice that cut through the din with terrifying clarity. It was raw and possessive, fueled by obsession. A man forced his way forward with eyes locked on Serafina, his devotion curdling into menace. His shout carried a twisted certainty, as if he were stating a truth the world had refused to acknowledge. Footsteps thundered across the pavement, closing the distance too quickly. There was a sharp, unmistakable sound as metal slid free from its sheath, the whisper of a blade promising irreversible harm. The noise echoed inside Serafina's skull as terror finally overrode every lesson in poise and control. The scream tore from her throat as her body recoiled on instinct. Her heels scraped against the carpet as she tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. Lights, cameras, and the crowd became walls closing in. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the glint of steel and the certainty that this was how it ended. The impact came without warning, brutal and absolute. It sounded wrong, too heavy and too final, like a sledgehammer striking flesh and bone. The attacker's momentum vanished in an instant, replaced by a choked groan as his body was violently redirected and slammed into the ground. Silence descended with shocking speed. Screams died in throats, cameras faltered, and even the city beyond the barricades seemed to hold its breath. The red carpet became eerily still as all eyes turned toward the unmoving figure on the ground and the man who stood over him like an executioner carved from stone.
Threat neutralized.
His voice cut through the silence with surgical precision, low and steady and devoid of emotion. It was not meant for reassurance, but stated as fact, as impersonal as a line in a report. The calmness sent a chill through everyone who heard it.
You are all fired. Get out of my perimeter.
He did not raise his voice. Authority radiated from him as he addressed the guards with a sharp, condemning gaze. Their failures were evident, and one by one they shrank back, suddenly aware they were no longer in control of anything. Is he dead? Her voice trembled as she stared at the man on the ground. Adrenaline drained away, leaving her shivering as the world felt unreal, like someone else's nightmare. Her arms wrapped around herself as if she could hold the pieces together by will alone.
He is sleeping. He has a broken jaw and 3 broken ribs.
Commander Vance stepped over the fallen attacker with deliberate ease and loomed over Serafina. He shrugged off his tuxedo jacket and draped it around her shoulders, the heavy fabric engulfing her and carrying his warmth.
Ms. Loram, I am Commander Vance. Your father hired me 5 minutes ago. We are leaving now.
The jacket settled around her like armor as his clipped words left no room for debate. He spoke as if the extraction had always been inevitable. Around them, cameras began to stir again, their clicks distant and irrelevant. But the show and the press, she clung to the remnants of her old reality and the obligations that had governed her life. The premiere and the expectations felt fragile now, yet letting go meant accepting how close she had come to losing everything.
The show is over. I am taking you to the extraction point. Close your eyes. Do not look at the cameras.
Without waiting for consent, Commander Vance lifted her effortlessly into his arms and turned away from the lights. His body became a shield as she closed her eyes and buried her face against his chest, while the cameras flared one last time and captured the violent end of one life and the beginning of another. The armored car door did not merely close. It slammed shut with the finality of a vault sealing itself, a concussive boom that swallowed the outside world whole. The red carpet chaos, the screaming crowd, the flashbulbs and sirens were abruptly severed, replaced by reinforced steel, tinted glass, and the suffocating sense of being entombed alive. The sound lingered in the cabin, vibrating through the metal frame, a reminder that escape was no longer an option. It was a decision already made for her. The engine came alive beneath them with a low, controlled hum, not the roar of speed, but the steady purr of something engineered for endurance and impact. It resonated through the floorboards and up into the seats, a mechanical heartbeat that never faltered. Every vibration felt deliberate, disciplined, as if the vehicle itself shared the temperament of the man behind the wheel, efficient, unyielding, and built for war rather than comfort. Serafina sat rigid in the back seat, her breath hitching as quiet sobs escaped despite her attempts to contain them. Tears slid down her cheeks in silence, catching on the sharp lines of her jaw before disappearing into expensive fabric, now wrinkled and stained with fear. Her body shook in small, involuntary tremors, the delayed reaction of a system that had just narrowly avoided catastrophic failure. Glamour had abandoned her. What remained was a young woman grappling with how close death had come.
Stop crying. It wastes electrolytes.
His voice came from the driver's seat without hesitation or warmth, cutting through the enclosed space like a blade through silk. He did not turn around. His posture remained forward, shoulders squared, hands steady on the wheel. The comment was not cruel in his mind, merely factual. Emotion, to him, was a variable that interfered with survival, and survival was the only metric that mattered. I almost died, and you broke a man's face in front of Vogue magazine. Who are you? A machine. Her words burst out sharp and jagged, anger finally overpowering shock. She leaned forward, nails digging into the leather seat, eyes blazing through tears. The absurdity of it all collided in her chest. The cameras, the blood, the violence unfolding where designers and celebrities were supposed to smile. She stared at the back of his head, searching for something human, something reassuring, and finding only silence and control.
I am the wall between you and the grave. Your previous security team was incompetent. They were looking at your legs, not the crowd. I do not care about your legs. I care about your pulse.
This time, there was no pause between his sentences. Each line landed like a brick laid into an invisible fortress he was constructing around her. His reflection flickered in the rearview mirror. Cold eyes, jaw set. A man who had already accepted that the world was hostile and that protection required brutality. To him, her body was not an icon or a brand. It was a vital system to be kept operational at all costs. Wow, charming. So what now? You follow me around and glare at people? She scoffed, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand in a gesture that was more defiant than effective. Sarcasm became her armor, thin but familiar. If she could not control the situation, she could at least mock it. Her reflection in the darkened window looked smaller than she remembered, swallowed by shadows and reinforced glass.
No, we are going to the Iron House, my private facility. You are going into total lockdown until the threat is apprehended. No phone, no social media, no fashion shows.
The words unfolded with chilling calm, each restriction tightening like a clasp around her life. The Iron House sounded less like a place and more like a sentence. As he spoke, the city lights outside blurred into streaks of gold and red, as if her world were already dissolving. Fame, connection, relevance, everything that defined her existence was being methodically stripped away in the name of safety. You cannot do that. I have a career. I have a life. Panic surged back into her voice, raw and unfiltered. Her hands flew outward as if the air itself might argue on her behalf. The thought of disappearing, even temporarily, terrified her almost as much as the gunman had. To be unseen, unposted, unphotographed, felt like a different kind of death. One no amount of couture could disguise. The car decelerated smoothly before coming to a complete stop. The engine idled, and for the first time since they had pulled away, Vance moved. He turned in his seat, leather groaning softly under the shift of his weight. The sound was intimate in the enclosed cabin, a subtle warning that his attention was now fully on her.
You have a target on your back. The man I took down was just a distraction. There was a sniper on the roof. My team took him out before he could fire. You were 2 seconds away from your head exploding on that red carpet.
Each sentence stripped away another layer of denial. His eyes locked onto hers, unblinking, forcing her to confront the reality she had been running from. Images flooded her mind, an unseen rifle scope, a finger tightening on a trigger, her face frozen forever in a photograph labeled tragedy. The red carpet transformed into a crime scene in her imagination, glittering with the violence that had almost claimed her. He paused, letting the silence expand, heavy and oppressive. When he spoke again, his voice dropped, rough with truth rather than menace. It carried the weight of someone who had seen this ending too many times and refused to allow it again.
So, Serafina, do you want a career or do you want to be alive?
The question echoed in the confined space, leaving nowhere to hide. Her throat tightened, and the fight drained out of her all at once. In that moment, the future she had planned fractured, replaced by the simple, terrifying understanding that none of it mattered if she did not survive the night. Alive. The word barely made it past her lips, fragile but honest. It was surrender, not to him, but to reality. Her shoulders sagged as if she had finally set down a weight she had been carrying for years, the illusion of invincibility.
Good choice. We are here.
The car eased forward once more, passing through unseen gates before coming to rest. Outside, something vast and impenetrable loomed. Its presence felt even through steel and glass. The iron house awaited, silent, watchful, and absolute. As the engine cut off, the fortress closed around them, and Serafina understood that this was not just a place of protection, but a point of no return. The electronic locks announced themselves with sharp, clinical beeps that echoed through the corridor like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. Heavy steel doors slid apart with mechanical indifference, their mass suggesting not just security, but finality. The air beyond was colder and stripped of warmth and personality, as if the room had been designed to discourage memory itself. Every sound was amplified by concrete surfaces that refused to soften or forgive. Inside, the room revealed its purpose with brutal clarity. Bare concrete walls rose without adornment, interrupted only by recessed lights that cast a merciless white glow. In the center stood a medical scanner with a low, steady hum that vibrated faintly through the floor. The space smelled of antiseptic and ozone, a place where bodies were measured rather than comforted, and where privacy was treated as a variable instead of a right.
Stand on the mark, arms out.
Vance's voice cut cleanly through the ambient hum, precise and stripped of inflection. A painted circle on the floor waited beneath the scanner, scuffed from countless prior uses. The instruction was not a request, but a protocol rehearsed until it had lost any trace of human hesitation. The scanner adjusted its pitch in response to proximity, as if aware a subject had entered its domain. "What is this?" Serafina's words hovered uncertainly in the sterile air. Her posture stiffened, arms half raised, eyes darting from the scanner to the walls as she searched for context and reassurance that never arrived. The room offered no answers, only reflections of her unease returning from every hard surface.
Scanning for trackers, bugs, wiretaps, your clothes. Take them off.
The explanation was delivered like a checklist item, devoid of ceremony. Vance did not look at her as he spoke, his gaze already disengaging and his mind operating several steps ahead. To him, the clothes were not garments, but potential threats that could hide technology and compromise missions. "Excuse me? No." Shock rippled through her, immediate and visceral. Her refusal was sharp and defensive, a reflexive attempt to reclaim control in a space designed to deny it. Heat flushed her face as her pulse quickened, each beat a small rebellion against the situation closing in around her. Vance turned away deliberately and faced the blank wall. His posture was rigid, shoulders squared, eyes fixed on a crack in the concrete with exaggerated focus. The gesture was procedural, a concession embedded in his training that acknowledged boundaries without slowing the process.
I am not looking, but your dress has complex stitching. A tracking chip could be sewn into the seams. Put on the gray sweatsuit on the table. Do it, or I will cut the dress off you to check it.
The table he referenced sat against the wall, metal and immaculate, holding a neatly folded gray sweatsuit that looked intentionally anonymous. The threat carried weight without a change in volume, framing the choice as an illusion between compliance now or force later. The scanner's hum seemed to grow louder, as if impatient. Fabric whispered against skin as Serafina moved. A zipper slid down with a soft rasp, magnified by the room's acoustics. Her breathing became shallow and uneven as she changed, each second stretching longer than the last, despite Vance's back being turned. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Humiliating me." Her voice trembled, despite her effort to steady it. The accusation laced with vulnerability. The question was less about his answer than her need to assign motive and make sense of the discomfort as something intentional rather than cold necessity.
I don't feel enjoyment. I feel responsibility. Are you dressed?
He remained facing the wall as he spoke, the words chosen carefully. Responsibility served as his shield, broad enough to justify actions that might otherwise weigh on him. The question signaled that the process was ready to continue. Yes. Only then did Vance turn back. He raised the handheld scanner as it activated, its surface catching the light. Two sharp beeps punctuated the air as he swept it over her, reading and confirming while the room seemed to wait for the verdict. The declaration was final. The dress, once a symbol of status and choice, was reduced to contaminated material. Somewhere beyond the room, systems would already be moving to erase it, fire-solving what scrutiny could not. That was couture. It cost $20,000. Indignation flared, sharp and bright, a last grasp at normalcy through outrage over something tangible. The price represented more than money, marking a life where choices like clothing mattered and loss was measured differently. Vance closed the distance with controlled steps and reached for her wrist. His fingers were firm and precise as he found her pulse with practiced ease, his touch clinical and his focus on the data her body provided.
Heart rate 120. You are panicked. Eat, sleep. I will be standing outside your door. If you need anything, do not scream. Just knock. I hear everything.
The instructions formed a structure he expected her to rely on. As he stepped back and reclaimed distance, the room seemed to exhale. Protocol had been satisfied, leaving the awareness of being watched, protected, and confined all at once. Night pressed down on the bunker like a living thing. Beyond the reinforced concrete walls, rain fell in relentless sheets, striking the ground with patient, echoing force. Each drop skittered across metal vents and pooled against sealed doors, creating a low, ceaseless percussion that seeped through the structure. The bunker seemed to breathe with the storm, its air heavy, cool, and faintly metallic, a place designed for survival rather than comfort, where darkness felt intentional and cultivated. Inside one of the narrow sleeping quarters, Serafina lay restless on the cot. The thin mattress dipped beneath her shifting weight as she turned again and again, sheets twisting around her legs like restraints. Sleep came in fragments, sharp and punishing. Her brow furrowed and her lips parted as shallow breaths escaped her. The echoes of the day refused to release their grip, replaying themselves behind her closed eyes with merciless clarity. Somewhere beyond the door, hinges moved with practiced restraint. The door yielded silently, and a slice of dim corridor light slipped into the room, barely enough to suggest a presence. Serafina's body reacted before her mind caught up as her muscles tensed. Her breath caught, and her eyes flew open with a gasp. "Who's there?" The question hung in the air, fragile and sharp, cutting through the rain's distant roar. Her heart hammered as she pushed herself up on her elbows, the shadows in the corners of the room suddenly alive with imagined threats.
It's me. You were thrashing. Nightmare.
Vance remained mostly still, a solid silhouette framed by darkness. His voice arrived calm and level, weighted with authority and familiarity. It did not rush to reassure and simply stated fact, as if facts themselves could anchor the room. "I keep seeing the knife. Why are you inside the room?" She sat up fully and drew the sheet tighter around herself. The memory clung to her as her gaze searched his outline, trying to reconcile safety with intrusion.
I check the perimeter every hour. Go back to sleep.
He answered as he always did, concise and procedural. To him, vigilance was not a choice, but a rhythm as constant as the rain outside. Sleep was another order, something that could be commanded. "I can't. It's too dark." "Vance?" The darkness felt thicker now that she had named it. Without the trappings of her old life, silence became oppressive and pressed in on her thoughts until they echoed.
Affirmative.
"Can you sit, just for a minute?" "I've never been alone like this. Usually I have assistants, makeup artists, people touching me constantly. Now it's just silence. It's loud. Her voice softened and lost its edge. The confession spilled out haltingly, each sentence exposing how unprepared she was for solitude. The absence of constant motion and contact had stripped away her defenses and left her raw in the quiet. Vance moved then. Heavy boots crossed the floor with deliberate steps, each one resonating faintly through the room. He pulled a chair closer and lowered himself into it, the sound grounding and physical proof that he was there.
I am sitting, sleep.
Tell me something, anything. Your voice is heavy, it grounds me. Her eyelids fluttered as exhaustion began to outweigh fear. His presence and the low register of his speech settled her racing thoughts in a way she did not fully understand.
I don't tell stories.
A rare pause followed, a subtle crack in his usual certainty. The role she was asking him to play did not fit neatly into his training. Please, just tell me why do you do this? The question was curious and almost gentle, reaching past the uniform and the protocols into the man beneath.
Because I am a weapon without a war. Protecting things and keeping them pristine is the only use for a man like me. You are pristine, Serafina. My job is to keep the blood off you.
Each word was chosen carefully and stripped of embellishment. To Vance, identity was function and worth was measured in effectiveness. Saying it aloud felt like stating a law of nature. You're not a weapon, you're a shield. Her voice went soft as sleep reclaimed her. The tension drained from her shoulders, and her breathing evened out until she slipped into unconsciousness, trusting him to hold the night at bay. Vance watched her for a long moment. In the hush that followed, even the rain seemed distant.
A shield gets battered, a shield gets broken. You have no idea what hits I have taken, and looking at you sleeping, I would take 1,000 more. Protocol breach. I am getting too close.
The words barely rose above a whisper and were meant for no one but himself. Awareness settled in his chest, heavy and unwelcome. This attachment was dangerous, yet he remained seated beside her, listening to the storm and her steady breathing. The gym was a sealed concrete box buried deep inside the building, a place designed to absorb violence without complaint. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a hard, clinical glow over sweat-darkened mats and scarred walls. The air was thick with the smell of rubber, metal, and exertion. Each impact against the punching bag sent a dull shockwave through the room, echoing like a heartbeat driven too fast. This was not a place for grace or beauty. It was where bodies were broken down and rebuilt into something harder. Serafina stood in front of the bag, shoulders burning and muscles screaming with fatigue she had never learned to negotiate. Every strike felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself were pressing her toward the floor. Vance circled her like a shadow, his presence constant and oppressive. He did not shout because he never needed to. His voice cut through the noise with the precision of a blade. She struck the bag once more, the impact shuddering up her arms and settling painfully into her joints. Her breath came in ragged pulls, her chest heaving as she tried and failed to summon strength that was no longer there. The bag swung back toward her, relentless, just like the training and the man behind her. I cannot. My arms hurt. I am a model, Vance. I am not a soldier. Vance moved closer, his footsteps quiet despite his size. He stopped directly behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His shadow swallowed hers, erasing the outline of who she thought she was. When he spoke again, it was not an argument, but a verdict.
Today you are a soldier. Imagine the man with the knife. He grabs you from behind.
Without warning, his arms came around her, massive and unyielding, locking her in place. The movement was controlled and professional, terrifying in its ease. Her back pressed against his chest and her arms were pinned as the reality of the hold set in.
Like this. What do you do?
Her mind emptied as every instruction vanished, replaced by the paralyzing fact of his strength. The room seemed to shrink around them while her body refused to obey her will. "I do not know. You are too strong. I cannot move." His head dipped closer, his breath warm against her ear. When he spoke, his voice was no longer just sound, but vibration, a low rumble that traveled straight through her spine.
Do not fight my strength. Use gravity. Drop your weight.
His hands shifted, firm but precise, adjusting her hips with the detached efficiency of a man used to turning bodies into weapons.
Here, elbow back, hard, into my ribs.
She hesitated, caught between instinct and reluctance, between the lesson and the man teaching it. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat louder than the last. "I do not want to hurt you." There was no bravado in his reply, only a flat certainty born from experience most people never survived.
You cannot hurt me. I am made of scar tissue. Do it.
She moved, and the strike landed with a heavy, unmistakable thud that reverberated through both of them before reality snapped back into place.
Better, again.
He tightened his hold, not to restrain her further, but to test her resolve. In that closeness, the moment shifted, and what had been instructional became charged with something dangerous and unspoken.
Your body is tense. You are trembling.
"It is not fear, Vance. It is you. You are touching me." He released her as if burned and stepped back so abruptly that the absence of his warmth felt like sudden cold.
Training is over. Go shower.
She turned to face him, her pulse still racing as frustration cut through the haze of adrenaline. He stood rigid, eyes guarded, every line of his body pulled tight. "Why do you run away every time we touch? You act like I am radioactive." For a moment, he said nothing, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession disguised as doctrine.
Because I am trained to neutralize threats, and you, Serafina, are the most dangerous thing in this building.
Evening settled over the living area with a quiet heaviness that crept in unnoticed and refused to leave. The lights were low, casting long shadows across the furniture and turning the walls into muted witnesses. Outside, the city exhaled after a day of spectacle and cameras, but inside the room, there was only the soft rustle of fabric and breath. Vance stood near the couch with his jaw tight in concentration as he unwound a bandage from his arm. Red had already seeped through the gauze, blooming slowly and stubbornly, as if his body refused to obey even now. The door opened without ceremony, and Serafina stepped inside, her presence altering the air immediately. She paused just long enough to take him in, the bare arm, the blood, and the way his shoulders were held too stiff for a man who claimed he was fine. The room felt smaller, with the unspoken history between them, charged with everything neither of them had dared to say since the red carpet, since the public smiles and private consequences. "You are bleeding." The stitches from the red carpet pulled open.
It is superficial.
He said it like a report, clipped and controlled, the same tone he used to dismiss threats and casualties alike. The blood contradicted him as it slid slowly down the line of his forearm. Serafina crossed the room with deliberate steps, as if approaching something fragile that might shatter if handled wrong. "Let me help. Sit down."
I do not need help.
The refusal was automatic and reflexive, honed by decades of surviving alone. He straightened instinctively, as if defiance itself could stitch skin back together. Serafina stopped directly in front of him, her expression hardening with resolve rather than anger. Something shifted as the title landed with unexpected weight. After a beat that stretched too long, Vance exhaled and the fight drained from his posture. He turned and lowered himself onto the couch with careful, weary movements, as though sitting required permission he was unused to granting himself. Serafina retrieved the first aid kit and knelt in front of him. The click of metal clasps echoed softly, followed by the faint, clinical scent of antiseptic. When she cleaned the wound, he hissed as the sting cut sharp and grounding. Her hands were steady and practiced, yet gentle in a way that suggested she understood pain more intimately than she let on. My God, your arm, your chest. There are so many scars. Her voice softened as her eyes traced the map written across his skin. Old wounds and newer ones layered over muscle and bone, each scar telling a story he had long buried under discipline and duty. When her fingers brushed his shoulder, he went still, with his breath caught between inhale and exhale. She traced the edge of a large scar slowly and reverently, as if touching history itself. What was this one?
Shrapnel Kabul, 2005.
The words came easily, like coordinates burned into memory. She nodded and let her fingers drift lower, following another jagged line. And this one?
Knife, Venezuela.
Her hand hesitated before moving to his chest and hovered just above his heart. When she touched the scar there, her breath faltered as the moment grew heavier with meaning. And this? Vance swallowed as the room seemed to close in and the past pressed hard against his ribs. When he finally spoke, his voice strained as control cracked just enough to reveal what lay beneath.
That one is not from a war. That was from trying to save someone I could not save.
Silence followed, thick and reverent. Serafina leaned closer until her forehead nearly touched his chest and pressed a soft kiss to the scar, an act so tender it felt almost dangerous. You saved me. Does that count? His breath hitched sharply as the years fell away, leaving only a man painfully aware of his own vulnerability.
Serafina, stop. If you keep touching me, I will forget that I am your employee. I will forget that I am 55 years old and broken.
She did not pull away and instead lifted her gaze to meet his, eyes steady and unafraid of the truth he had laid bare. Good? Forget it. I do not want the employee. I want the man who bled for me. The fortress erupted into chaos without warning. Alarms screamed through the corridors, piercing and relentless, vibrating through steel and bone alike. Red alert sirens pulsed with mechanical urgency, staining every breath with panic. Somewhere beyond the reinforced walls, gunfire cracked and echoed sharp and irregular, a reminder that the perimeter was failing and time was bleeding away second by second.
They found us. Breach at the north gate. Serafina, get to the panic room.
Vance's voice cut through the din like a weapon, raw and commanding, shaped by years of combat and loss. He was already moving as he shouted, scanning angles and calculating distances, every instinct honed for survival. The facility trembled faintly beneath their feet, as if even the walls understood the gravity of what was unfolding. I'm not leaving you. Her protest was immediate and fierce, despite the fear tightening her chest. She stood her ground for a heartbeat, eyes locked on his, refusing to be left behind as another casualty of his sense of duty. But the battlefield did not negotiate, and neither did Vance.
Not an option.
He surged forward and scooped her up with decisive strength, her breath hitching as the world tilted. His boots pounded against the floor as he ran, every stride eating distance, while the sounds of pursuit chased them from behind. Footsteps thundered in the corridor until the massive steel vault door loomed before them like a final promise. The door slammed shut with brutal finality, reinforced metal meeting, reinforced frame. Internal locks engaged one by one, heavy mechanisms grinding and sealing them inside. The noise fell away abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by ragged breathing and the low hum of life support systems. The panic room was unforgivingly small, designed for endurance rather than comfort. There was nowhere to move or turn without touching. They were pressed together by necessity, bodies aligned by circumstance, heat and tension trapped in the confined air between them. Are we safe? Her voice dropped to a whisper, as though the walls themselves might be listening. She barely dared to breathe, the closeness magnifying every sensation, from the rise and fall of his chest to the tremor she felt through his frame.
This room can withstand a nuclear blast. We are safe. But the oxygen recycler is loud. Are you hurt?
As he spoke, he guided her back until her shoulders met the cold metal wall. One arm braced beside her, while the other remained instinctively protective as he assessed her for injuries. The steady churn of the oxygen recycler filled the space, a reminder that survival was being measured and rationed. "No, but you are shaking." She noticed what he tried to hide, the barely controlled tremor running through him and the aftermath of violence held in check. Her fingers hovered near his chest, feeling the rapid beat beneath layers of armor and resolve.
Adrenaline, combat mode. I need to go out there and kill them.
The words came out clipped and dangerous, spoken by the soldier who lived inside him. His jaw tightened as his gaze unfocused, his mind reaching for the battlefield beyond the door and the instinct to eliminate every threat before it could reach her. "No, stay here, please. If you go out there and die, I will never forgive you. Just stay with me. Hold me." She grabbed his tactical vest, fingers digging into hardened fabric and straps, anchoring him to her. Fear and resolve tangled in her eyes as a plea born of love and desperation. The room seemed to shrink further around them, the air thick with everything unsaid.
You have no idea how hard it is to be this close to you and not claim you. We might die tonight, Serafina. If they drill through the door.
A low groan escaped him as he leaned in, his control fraying under the weight of proximity and possibility. The thought of loss pressed against him harder than any enemy. Death felt intimate, hovering just beyond the steel between them and the world outside. "Then kiss me. If we die, I want my last memory to be you." The decision shattered what little restraint remained. Their mouths met in a desperate collision fueled by fear and longing, and the awareness of time slipping away. Armor scraped against metal as he lifted her and pinned her to the wall, the kiss deepening as the moment consumed them.
I will kill anyone who tries to take this moment from me.
The reinforced steel door did not simply fail. It suffered. Under the relentless bite of the cutting torch, the metal glowed from dull red to blinding white, sagging and warping as if it were flesh held over an open flame. Sparks erupted in violent showers, ricocheting off the concrete walls and skittering across the floor like frantic, burning insects. The air filled with the acrid stench of molten alloy and ozone, thick enough to sting the lungs. Every second stretched unbearably long, each hiss of the torch a countdown toward inevitable breach.
They are cutting through. Get behind me.
Vance moved with instinct, drilled by years of command and combat. He positioned himself squarely between Serafina and the door, his broad frame becoming a living shield. The handgun came up smoothly, practiced and precise, his grip unwavering despite the chaos. As he racked the slide, the sharp click-clack cut cleanly through the roar of the torch, a small but defiant declaration of readiness. In that sound lived muscle memory, discipline, and a promise that whatever came through that door would face him first. "Vance, I love you." Her words landed with more force than any incoming bullet ever could. In the suffocating heat and noise, that confession carved out a fragile pocket of stillness. Fear trembled beneath her voice, but it was anchored by something stronger. Devotion sharpened by the knowledge that they might not survive the next few seconds. The world narrowed to the space between their heartbeats, to everything left unsaid that suddenly felt painfully urgent. He did not turn around when he spoke. He could not afford to. Yet every word carried the weight of a vow forged long before this moment. His gaze remained locked on the failing door, jaw set, shoulders squared, as if sheer will might hold the line. What he offered her was not comfort, but certainty, the kind that said he had already accepted any cost, including his own life, without hesitation. The breach came in an instant of pure violence. Pressure built, then released, as the door exploded inward with a concussive roar. Shards of metal screamed through the air, slamming into walls and embedding themselves deep in concrete. The shockwave rattled bones and stole breath, turning the corridor into a storm of smoke, debris, and fire. For a heartbeat, the world was nothing but ringing ears and blinding light. Gunfire erupted immediately, a chaotic symphony of muzzle flashes and deafening cracks. Bullets tore through the haze, chewing into walls and shredding what little cover remained. The smell of cordite burned hot and bitter, mixing with smoke until the air itself felt hostile. Vance fired back with controlled fury, each shot deliberate, each recoil traveling up his arms as he held the line against overwhelming force. Pain struck suddenly, brutally. A round found its mark, driving the breath from Vance's lungs in a raw, involuntary grunt. His body reacted before his mind could, muscles tightening, vision narrowing to a tunnel edged with white fire. Still, he stayed upright, refusing to give ground even as blood began to soak into his uniform, dark and spreading. Vance.
Target down. I am okay.
Even as his strength faltered, duty came first. His eyes tracked the fallen threat, confirming the kill through the blur of pain. The lie slipped out easily, spoken more for her than for himself. The adrenaline that had carried him this far began to ebb, and with it came the crushing weight of his injuries. His knees finally gave way. The world tilted as he dropped, the impact jarring and final. One hand went instinctively to the wound, slick with blood, while the other braced against the floor. Every breath became a conscious effort, each inhale shallow and ragged, as if his lungs had forgotten how to work without being ordered.
Just need a minute.
The words were barely audible. Time stretched again, distorted by shock and pain. The battlefield noise seemed distant now, muffled, as though he were sinking underwater. He focused on staying present, on not letting the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision pull him under. There is so much blood. Stay with me. Look at me, Commander. That is an order. She dropped to her knees beside him, hands slick and trembling as she pressed against the wound, trying desperately to stem the flow. Tears blurred her vision, streaking down her face as fear gave way to fierce resolve. Her voice shook, but the command was real, rooted in shared history, in trust, in the unspoken agreement that he did not get to leave her here alone.
Yeah. Ma'am.
The response was faint, but it was there. A ghost of his usual discipline surfaced through the pain, a reflex born of countless missions and moments just like this. His eyes struggled to focus on her face, anchoring himself to her presence. In that fragile exchange, amid blood and smoke and ruin, survival became not a strategy, but an act of obedience and love. The hospital room existed in a state of perpetual twilight, neither fully day nor fully night. Pale fluorescent light seeped down from the ceiling panels, softened by drawn curtains that filtered the outside world into a muted blur of gray and white. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and recycled oxygen, a sterile sharpness that clung to the back of the throat. Machines surrounded the bed like silent sentinels, their screens glowing softly, their wires and tubes tracing lifelines between flesh and technology. Time here did not move forward so much as it hovered, suspended in the steady rhythm of survival. The heart monitor dominated the soundscape, its steady beeping marking each second with clinical indifference. It did not hurry. It did not hesitate. Each tone was proof of life, precise and mechanical, a metronome counting out Vance's continued presence in the world. Beneath that rhythm came smaller noises, the whisper of airflow from a vent, the distant murmur of hospital staff beyond the door, the occasional squeak of rubber soles against polished floors. All of it formed a fragile cocoon around the bed. Vance surfaced from unconsciousness slowly, dragged upward through layers of darkness and pain. Awareness returned in fragments, a dull ache radiating through his shoulder, a deeper, burning throb in his leg, the unfamiliar weight of bandages restricting his movement. As he shifted, the sheets rustled softly, fabric sliding against fabric, a sound strangely loud in the quiet room. His breath hitched once as his body protested the motion, reminding him that he had not escaped unscathed.
Status report.
Status: you are an idiot. You took 2 bullets, one in the shoulder and one in the leg. The police caught the rest of them. The stalker is in custody. It is over. Vance tried to push himself upright, muscles tensing on instinct rather than sense. The movement pulled sharply at his wounds, sending a spike of pain through his body. But determination outweighed discomfort. To him, a hospital bed was just another temporary position, another place he did not intend to remain. His jaw tightened as he shifted, already calculating exits and thinking in terms of objectives completed and obligations concluded.
Then my contract is fulfilled. I need to leave.
Serafina reacted instantly. She rose from the chair and pressed a firm hand against his chest, pushing him back down into the mattress. The gesture was both practical and emotional, fueled by fear that he would tear himself open again, and by frustration that he could even think of leaving now. The bed creaked softly under the sudden movement, the sheets bunching beneath him as gravity reclaimed its hold. "Excuse me?" Vance stared up at the ceiling for a moment, gathering his breath, then turned his head toward her. His voice carried the weight of rules he had lived by for decades. Every word was measured and defensive, an attempt to restore distance where intimacy had breached his carefully built walls. He spoke not just to her, but to himself, reinforcing the boundaries he believed could still protect them both.
The threat is neutralized. You do not need a bodyguard anymore. And after what happened in the panic room, I have compromised my professionalism. I cannot be around you.
Serafina's composure cracked. Her eyes flashed, and her voice rose, raw with disbelief and hurt. She had watched him bleed and had felt the terror of almost losing him, and now he was trying to reduce it all to procedure and protocol. To her, this was not about contracts or professionalism. It was about the undeniable connection forged in moments of fear and closeness, moments that could not be erased by paperwork or pride. You think you can just quit? You think after you bled for me, after you kissed me, you can just hand me an invoice and walk away? Vance finally met her gaze fully. In his eyes was a lifetime of violence and vigilance, a history etched into scars both visible and hidden. He saw her as she was, brilliant and luminous, untouched by the darkness that defined him. Speaking now felt like confession and farewell all at once. Each sentence was an act of self-erasure, a deliberate attempt to place himself where he believed he belonged, apart and alone.
Serafina, look at me. I am a scarred, violent old man. I live in bunkers. I have enemies. You belong on magazine covers. You belong in the light. I am the shadow. Shadows do not get the girl.
The room held its breath. What had once been a sterile hospital chamber now felt charged, as if the walls themselves were leaning inward to listen. The machines hummed with quiet persistence, their lights blinking like watchful eyes. Outside the window, the city glowed in distant fragments. But inside, time narrowed to a single moment where fear had finally burned itself out and left something harder, brighter, and unyielding in its place. Serafina pushed herself upright from the chair with deliberate calm. The movement was unhurried, almost ceremonial, as though she were stepping into a role she had rehearsed in silence for weeks. The weakness that once bent her shoulders was gone. In its place stood a woman anchored by resolve, her spine straight and her chin lifted. When she inhaled, it was not shallow or uncertain. It was the breath of someone who had survived and decided never to be small again. "You're right, I don't need a bodyguard anymore." Her words landed between them with the weight of finality. Vance lay back against the pillows, the thin hospital sheets drawn to his waist, his body still bearing the quiet cost of battles fought in her name. For a fleeting instant, the air sharpened, as if bracing for impact. The title she stripped away had defined their days and nights, their boundaries and excuses. "So I am firing you." The sentence cut cleanly, without tremor or apology. Vance's jaw tightened, and something flickered across his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or relief masquerading as indifference. He had prepared himself for this ending in the long hours when sleep refused to come. Still, preparation did nothing to dull the ache of hearing it spoken aloud.
Good, that is for the best.
He forced the words out, each one measured and controlled, as if discipline alone could keep the hurt from spilling over. His gaze drifted toward the ceiling, tracing cracks only he could see, searching for a place to set the feeling down where it could not reach her. Serafina stepped closer, the soft sound of her shoes against the floor impossibly loud in the quiet room. She leaned over the bed, close enough that her shadow fell across him, and retreat was no longer an option. The space between them collapsed, replaced by warmth, gravity, and an undeniable pull that neither of them pretended not to feel. "But I am hiring a new role." Her voice lowered, not in weakness, but in intimacy. It wrapped around him, coaxing his attention back where she wanted it, on her, on this moment, and on the truth neither of them had dared to name until now. Husband, lover, life partner. Each word was delivered like a signature, deliberate and irrevocable. Titles transformed into vows and promises that rewrote the rules they had lived by. The world beyond the room faded further, until there was only her face above him and the quiet thunder of his own heartbeat answering hers. "The pay is terrible, but the benefits include me." A glimmer of challenge sparked in her eyes, daring him to refuse and daring him to doubt what they both already knew. She was no longer asking for protection. She was offering herself, fully and without armor. "Do you accept the mission?" Vance finally looked at her properly. The woman before him was not the frightened figure he had once sworn to guard. She was fire-tempered into steel, and she was choosing him with terrifying certainty.
You are crazy.
The words were blunt, but they carried wonder more than judgment. A corner of his mouth twitched, betraying the awe he could not hide. "I learned from the best." She did not look away. Her confidence was absolute, forged in pain and persistence, and it left no room for doubt. "Accept the mission, Vance. Say it." His hand lifted slowly, as if afraid that moving too fast might shatter the moment. His fingers brushed her cheek with reverence, a touch so gentle it felt like a vow in itself. The world narrowed again, focusing on the warmth of skin against skin and the silent understanding passing between them.
Mission accepted.
The decision settled into him with absolute clarity. There was no hesitation left and no edge of doubt, only certainty, fierce and consuming.
But be warned.
His voice dropped, roughened by something primal and honest.
Once I sign this contract,
A low resonance vibrated through his chest, not a threat, but a promise, raw and unfiltered.
I never leave my post. You are stuck with me.
Serafina smiled, slow and unafraid, as if this was the only outcome she had ever wanted. "That's exactly what I want. My iron house." Their lips met, sealing a contract no paper could hold. The kiss was not hurried. It was anchoring, a convergence of past battles and future promises. Nearby, the heart monitor quickened its rhythm, echoing the surge between them and translating emotion into sound. The room no longer felt like a place of recovery, but of beginning, where protection transformed into partnership and duty into devotion.